It's MDMA, isn't it?
No!
Is it LCD?
That's LSD.
SD, you idiot.
LCD.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Talking TWAMPs. My name is Ryan Walter, and I will be your host for today. It's been a while since I've last hosted an episode of this, and I am excited to be back. We're going to start by introducing the panel to you, and our topic for today is going to be something that I think you're going to have a lot of fun listening to. It's going to be what is your favorite country, and which country do you want to see succeed the most in the next 10 years? So, Blake, why don't you start with introducing yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Blake. I'm a government and German major, which, if anything, might be just the slightest clue to my answer to at least half of this question.
Go for it. I'm just laughing. Oh, is that it? That's your entire
That's my
introduction?
intro,
Wow,
yes.
that was halfway through. Okay. Hi, I am William Moore, disassembler of computers and government and economics major. And yeah, we'll be rolling into this soon. I keep myself ambiguous.
Hi, I'm Joe Bystransky. I'm a reassembler of computers, primarily with duct tape and glue. And I am an IR and Russian post-Soviet studies major.
And then, as I said earlier, my name is Ryan Walter, and I am a geology and a history double major here at the college, so I have no business being with any of these people right now.
Yeah, why don't you leave, Ryan?
I feel like my answers for this question are going to be a bit interesting compared to everyone else's. But
If
William,
you say
no, you want to stay ambiguous. I'm going to leave you for
boy.
a little later.
Yeah.
Joe,
We
why
also
don't
have to figure out how we define
Joe,
all
why
this stuff.
don't we start with you? And when I say favorite, I mean, I don't know, what country do you like to Google and learn more about, things like that? And then what country do you want to see? And if it's the same one, that's great. Which country do you want to see succeed? And, things like that.
If for the former question you mean, just general interest, that's a harder question than the latter. So
Yeah,
I'm going
much
to,
harder question.
I'm going to answer the latter question first. Which country would I like to see succeed specifically over the next 10 years? I'm going to be unsurprising and say Russia.
You want to see it succeed.
Hey,
Yes, I
now
do.
listen, hear him out, because I think I know where he's going
Yes,
with this.
I do. I think that Russia has the potential to be a really great, force for good in the world. It's huge. It's rich with natural resources. It's still got some of the best, technical education in the world. But unfortunately, right now, it is under the control of a regime which prevents it from reaching its potential because it wants to throw money away on a stupid pissing match with Europe. I think if Vladimir Vladimirovich were to fall over tomorrow and there were to be some sort of new regime which was able to actually bring the country in a, not even necessarily European, but a modern and a more liberal direction, it would do more good for the world than practically any other country you could imagine.
All right, Joe. So one of the reasons that we're doing this topic is because we were having a little bit of an issue coming up with a more relevant international relations topic. So, Joe, in your picture of seeing Russia succeed, how do you see them addressing the current situation in what is, semi-autonomous Kurdistan and that whole area that they've been meddling in for a very long time? And I know that you have very strong opinions on.
Kurdistan?
Yeah. Kurdistan.
To be honest, I wasn't expecting that question.
That's fair. I'm doing this. This is the topic because we're talking about a lot of things now.
I'll tell you what, this probably isn't the answer you're looking for, but I would probably envision such a country being less interested in geopolitical struggles than they are now. Russia's current interest in that region is very closely related to their relations with Turkey and Syria, specifically because of their desire to maintain a naval presence in the Mediterranean Sea. And while I wouldn't necessarily say that Russia should not have a presence in the Mediterranean Sea, I would say that in an ideal situation, they would be less immediately concerned with that than they are now.
That it wouldn't necessarily even matter to them, because for this, their presence there is all about power projection, which if Joe's ideal Russia were to come about, their power projection would come much more about in, I'm assuming, cultural and scientific progress.
Or that their they would become more Europeanized, and they would think of their military projection through a European sphere. We've got this EU army going on.
Oh boy,
so,
that's part of mine.
Is it? All right, well, I'm just thinking, I see absolutely no reason why Russia should care about Syria. What it is that they feel threatened by the West, and they feel the need to maintain these forward positions. And I see no reason why they should in an ideal situation.
Well, see, I really don't even think they're really that much threatened now, which is, I think, a bit of a false narrative that the Russian government propagates in some way. I don't know that Europe really has many designs on pushing Russia any further back. I think that Russia's, fear is that their reacquisition of territory will be halted. And so, if anything, I think that this sort of projected need for forward naval bases is less to do with a real sense that Europe is planning an attack, and much more sort of Putin going, all right, if I'm going to be able to push forward, if I'm going to be able to take regional power gains, I require some sort of military deterrent against European engagement.
Well, obviously I'm not sympathetic to the viewpoint which is producing these actions, but I don't necessarily agree with your point of view.
What would Europe push them back on, though?
Well, they have been. If you think about it, imagine Putin and a large percentage of the Russian population grew up under the Soviet Union, in which their boys in green were in Germany, and then in 91, in 89. They got pushed back from all of those Eastern Bloc countries, and then in 91 they lost that whole Western sphere. I don't know, honestly, if Putin actually believes the stuff he's peddling, but I think it's entirely possible that he does. In which case, it's very easy to see the Europeanization of the Baltic states and Ukraine as aggressive and threatening. If you'd see the world from purely a realpolitik stance and don't believe in the value of global democracy, I think it's a perfectly possible viewpoint.
I'm just trying to think in terms of realpolitik, though. I mean, as long as you don't... So if you consider those countries, those Eastern Bloc territories, truly lost from the 91 split off, then their Europeanization doesn't really change much unless you intend to reacquire them, in which case you don't really consider them lost as much as temporarily separated. And so that's my argument, that because the other thing is, I don't think that Putin has any real reason to fear, even from a realpolitik stance, any sort of continued splitting off of Russian territories. There really isn't a historical country left, barring possibly Chechnya. But I mean, that one province, that single province, is probably the only remaining territory within Russia that could be reasonably said to be a part of a non-Russian Slavic state that could be split off for any reason.
Well, I don't know. I would argue that because the eastern provinces especially are not what you consider.
There's a lot of non-Russians in Russia. But I think the viewpoint is that the West has been peeling away parts of what was, Russian influence.
So, Joe,
and it's possible to see, and we are, of course, ridiculously off topic.
No. The point about this topic is that you can be off topic. Now I'm going to ask you, try to relate it back to it.
Go ahead.
With what you've just said and what you and Blake and William have just discussed, in seeing, Russia succeed, which is something that you said you wanted, and how then does Russia address, this encroaching Europe, as you said it? Do they just ignore it and push forward through scientific and cultural means, or do they also have to worry about that, or is it something that you don't know?
It's a question of viewpoints, I think, because the viewpoint that I lay out, which is championed by the Putin regime, is at least internally consistent, but I don't believe in it. I believe in the value of the inherent value of liberal democratic institutions. In which case, I would say that Russia should not fear Western encroachment. They should, become a part of it. I think ideally Russia should join the European Union and should join NATO and all of these institutions. Here's what I'll say. I think European advancement into Eastern Europe is a legitimate threat to Russia, but only because Russia has made it so and has decided to oppose it. I think if there had not been these, overreactions in Moldova and in Georgia and in Ukraine, Russia could have, joined the Western world, quote unquote, and had nothing to fear.
But see, that's my contention, that most of these westernization movements in these Eastern European countries are in turn an internal reaction to the policy of Russia that is not to say how much more can they take from us, but how much more can we take back after 91.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just offering an alternative
And
viewpoint.
I'm not saying that you are disagreeing with me. I'm just saying that I'm trying to posit that your alternative viewpoint is not how the Putin regime sees politics. I think that the Putin regime I think that they peddle a fairly consistent how much more can we lose message to their populace to keep them fearful so that they can use tactics that would otherwise be unapproved by a populace. But I think that Putin is a fairly strategic person, and I think he sees, much as many other analysts have put it, that those territories in the east are lost territories, and that the clock is ticking for him to get those back. And so I think that reasonably he doesn't fear losing those territories losing other territories as much as he fears losing those territories that he's already lost. He just doesn't see it that way. He sees them as temporarily wayward.
Well, it depends on how
Speaking
you
of countries that have lost a lot of territory, Blake, why don't you tell us about your favorite country?
All right. So I will answer both of your questions, Ryan, and then we can talk about either one of them. And not to criticize Joe for not. He's right. The first question is a little harder than the second.
It's an artful dodge.
My favorite country is Germany. I'm super interested in how they've been able to turn the corner. They're quite possibly one of the only countries that has been able to manage what is essentially a voluntary social repression of extremist values that the government didn't really have to engage much in, that the society really did themselves. And
shout out to the Denazification Commission.
Exactly. And then the other thing, the country that I'm most want to see do well, while I want to see Germany do well, I feel like they don't need my well wishes. I feel like they're doing just fine. My country that I would desperately like to see do well in the next century is Ireland. Just because I have such an affinity for them, and it hurts me every time I look at a map and their island isn't all Ireland. Because the day that they stop calling them Northern Irish is the day that I'll stop considering them Irish, because all they've done is tacked an adjective onto it.
You'll stop considering them Irish. Interesting.
You took me.
I know. I knew I took yours. I didn't mean to, but I knew that we were going to agree.
All right, that's fair. Well, I'll save mine for the end then. William, why don't you go? You've been ambiguous. Does anyone have anything else to say about Germany and everything? We had a wonderful conversation about Russia.
To be honest, Western Europe, the United States, and Germany's included in Western Europe, is basically playing the world on easy mode.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Their problems are so minimal.
Yeah, like even here in the U.S., we're not actively concerned about militias breaking down the door and just shooting people, which is an issue in other parts of the world. Don't give me that crap.
Some of us should be worried.
But it's just not the Western world has the entire game on easy mode effectively. My nation, with Joe's approach, I'm just going to counterbalance here. Joe's approach is if suddenly succeed implies that they have to revitalize the country in order to basically change the entire dynamic of the way that the government functions. Mm-hmm. And when I hear the term succeed, I just say in the next 10 years, we're not seeing radical government change. We're just seeing where do they get in terms of that, and if that's a good thing. And for me, the obvious answer is long term, I would like to see the U.S. succeed, but I think the best way to do that through another nation effectively would actually be seeing India succeed. India is a country.
No, let's talk about this. I want to talk about this. Go.
So India is a country that's obvious. It's very poor at the moment, but it's a nation that's working very hard to industrialize, and they want to become a center of industrial power. And I would argue that this is a good thing because then it gives the U.S. a secondary base to basically have as an industrial rival.